Thank you, John. In Nevada, school districts recently laid off 7 of their teachers of the year. Some of the best teachers in the classroom got pink slips. In Michigan, school districts are spending over a quarter of their budget on retirement benefits. And in Wisconsin, property taxes went up every year over the past decade. Why? The answer can be summed up in 2 words: government unions. Unions use their power to press government to put their interests first. In contract negotiations, unions always insist on seniority-based layoffs. This gives guaranteed job security to their more senior members, who have more clout within the union. But it also means that school districts are forced to lay off the new hires first, even if those teachers are star performers. Parents object, but the unions have decided they can accept that. And unions also want, understandably, very generous retirement benefits for their members. In Michigan, 27% of school districts' budgets are going to provide pensions and health benefits. And it's not hard to see why. In the state, you can retire after 25 years on the job and collect full benefits. So you have a lot of teachers retiring in their late 40s or in their early 50s. But if you care about getting a classroom dollar spent on the classroom, well, that's a bit of a problem in a state that's facing a tremendous budget crunch like Michigan is. But when the legislature recently proposed raising the minimum retirement age, not to 65, the Social Security age, but to 60, the Michigan Education Association used their political clout to kill the bill. If costs were going to be cut, they wanted those cuts to come elsewhere. Or they wanted taxes to go up. That's what's been happening in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, school districts and municipalities simply didn't have the power to roll back some of those union benefits. So the only solution to keep the services going was higher taxes. The unions were fine with that. But it wasn't until Scott Walker's reforms, which they protested vehemently, that the school districts and the municipalities gained the ability to get control of their budgets and bring costs down. And that's when we saw property taxes fall. Government exists to serve the people, protecting the public, giving children a good education, not needlessly cutting into families' take-home pay. The common good has to take priority over the interests of any narrow group, any interest group. But government unions make this impossible. Think about what collective bargaining powers do. It means that the people's, their elected representatives, have to sit down with government unions and bargain with them as equals over how do we spend taxes, how is the government going to be operated. Unless the government's unions agree, the public policy can't be enacted. So if you have a school district that is elected overwhelmingly, elect the school board members on a platform of, say, ending tenure, and instead evaluating teachers on the basis of performance and giving promotions to the best teachers and removing ineffective teachers from the classrooms, that school board does not have the power in our democracy to enact that platform. They have to sit down with the unions, and the unions say, no. And that's that. The school board does not have the power to implement these reforms. Now, that's undemocratic. And that's something the union movement itself once recognized. A half-century ago, in 1959, the AFL-CIO Executive Council stated, and I'm quoting directly, "In terms of accepted collective bargaining procedures, government workers have no right beyond the authority to petition Congress, a right available to every citizen." But since then, the union movement has changed its mind. Most states have now given them collective bargaining powers in government, and the results have been disastrous. And that's why I'm delighted to welcome Mallory Facor to the Heritage Foundation today to speak about his new book, Shadowbosses. This book reveals how government unions have twisted the government from serving the public good into serving their own interests. And Mallory Facor has the expertise to write this book. He's the John C. West Professor of International Politics and American Government at the Citadel, and he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, who has frequently testified before Congress about financial regulations and other economic issues. Mallory is also the senior editor of Money and Politics for TheStreet.com and has written widely on economic issues for publications including The Wall Street Journal, Forbes magazine, and many national newspapers. Previously, he served as chairman of the Free Enterprise Fund, a free market do tank that advocates economic growth, lower taxes, and limited government, and is the same institution that brought the lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of Sarbanes-Oxley all the way to the Supreme Court. Mallory was also a senior fellow at the House Republican Study Committee from 2007 through 2011, and he chaired the Economic Roundtable for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 2009. Please join me in welcoming Mallory Facor to the Heritage Foundation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Wow, this is thrilling. What an honor to be here. There's so many people to thank that helped with this book. But before I even do that, I want to thank Heritage. The Heritage people have just been outstanding. And I am just honored to have their leader and president and Mr. Heritage, Ed Fulner over there. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for joining me in this today. Also, John Hillbolt. I don't know if he's here. John Hillbolt set this up. What a delight. How easy this is to do this because of a person like John Hillbolt. But I'll tell you something. I am also intimidated a little bit to have James Shirk here. A number of things in this book are in there because of James Shirk. We quote him extensively, and the work he does is truly important for America. I'm only going to take a couple more seconds to thank my publisher who's in the audience, from Hachette, Kate Hartson, and a couple of other people who have just been so important to this book. One in particular, Don Luz, who's sitting over there, who has been just an absolute godsend in terms of the amount of help and the amount of work he's put into it. This book is really all their book, as well as our book. I want to share with you a little bit about why I wrote this book. I started working on this project with my wife about a year ago. For years I've written and I've spoken about the growing national debt, and we investigated why government is growing beyond its means. I've been sounding that alarm for years, and I've spent a lot of time looking at the root causes of the excessive spending. What I discovered is that shadow bosses are setting the agenda. They're setting the agenda in Congress. They're setting the agenda in our state houses. They're setting the agenda in our city councils and on our school boards, as James so well put it before. It's really about our government spending too much on government employees, hiring too many, and paying them too much. This is how I got to the subject of government employee unions. I began exploring how these government employee unions lobby our government to increase spending on government employees, which, by the way, increases their dues income and gives them more money to spend on politics. It's this cycle, this corrupt cycle of political spending, which benefits government employee unions far more than it even benefits the government employees. And it drives our nation into debt. And that's why I explored this topic, and that's how this book came about. Coming into this room, somebody said, "What is a shadow boss?" So I'm going to take about 2 minutes and just try to explain that to you. And what does a shadow boss have to do with government employee unions? Well, in our lives, our shadow bosses are the people that we really work for, the people who hold us accountable for the decisions that we make in our lives. It's our fathers telling us to study harder so we'll have a chance for a bright future. It's our mothers pressing us to stay out of trouble. It's our football coaches sending in plays from the sidelines. For many of us, God is our shadow boss, giving us a plan for action we ought to take and the consequences if we don't. Unfortunately, as I found writing this book, for many of our political leaders, their shadow bosses are the government employee union bosses. These bosses tell them what to do, which legislation to support, and when to bend to the demands of the unions in contract negotiations. The shadow bosses are there to pat politicians on the back and to tear them down when they don't do things in their interest. It is shocking to me, but not to people like James Shirk over here, that over 20 million people work for government, and 41% of those people are represented by a union. Government workers are 5 times as unionized as private employees. Only 7.6% of private sector workers are represented by a union. and far less than that are actually union members. But the rate of unionization, interestingly enough, varies by state and by profession. In 20 states, less than 20%